Hello, everybody. How we doing today? All right, good, good, good. Well, my name is Noe. This is Megan, and this is Aaron. And today we're going to be giving a PowerPoint over PowerPoints. So we all know how exciting PowerPoints can be. So I just ask that you please contain your excitement. Let us get through our presentation, and once we're done, I promise we can have a big group discussion about why presentations and PowerPoint are fun. All right. But seriously though, let me see a show of hands. How many people have used PowerPoint or Present? All right, figured everybody. So this topic may be kind of boring a little bit, but we hope that we can just teach y'all one or two things. That way we'll go ahead and get the ball rolling. This is chapter 5, designing your visuals. We're going to start with the overview. I'm going to start it off with starting with titles and specifying your point. Then I'm going to pass it off to Erin, where she's going to discuss designing a basic template and thinking visually as you design. And then Megan is going to close it off with editing your efforts and then giving a summary and our course. So, starting with titles. It's very important because you save time and you focus your efforts. It makes the presentation smooth, efficient, and it makes the information easier to digest. Also, you want to make sure that you give your audience things that they need to see. Oftentimes, too many visuals are used, and it can just clutter up the whole screen, and you can lose the focus of the audience pretty quickly. Some important things to remember when you are designing slides. Reinforce the structure, emphasize your main messages, and draw attention to supporting points. Reinforcing structure. That's basically just going to be the outline of your whole presentation. You're going to start with the title slide, and that's actually very important. It's going to introduce your color scheme and the graphics that you're going to be using. Now that's very important because the color scheme is going to basically kind of let everybody know how the presentation is going. If you want to do a light and brisk type presentation, feel free to use bright colors and fun fonts. But if you're in a business setting, it may be wise to just use color neutral tones. That way the information is what's key and nobody's getting distracted by the designs. And then of course you're going to have your preview slide, kind of like we had our outline slide, which is going to let the audience know what's going to be talked about. Your main section slides, summary slides, and the closing title. Closing title is also very important. Again, depending on what type of situation you're in, you can maybe end on a quote, funny video, just depends on the guidelines that you're given. Drawing attention to supporting points. This is important if you have a message that you feel needs to be elaborated. Maybe it's just a complex thing that needs to be explained a little bit more. Feel free to use visuals, flow charts, anything that will help bolster that supporting point as long as it contributes to it and not takes away. So, clarifying your point. You want to start with a clarifying title. That speeds up the information sharing and it tells the audience exactly what's going to be talked about. And just like now, you see, wake me up when your presentation is over. You have to be able to adapt to the situation. If I'm boring you guys and you guys are like, ugh, when's this going to end? I'm ready for it to be done. I'm trying to get out of class early. I don't want to talk about this. And I'm going to need to adapt. And I'm going to maybe take out some information that's not that important to speed up the presentation. However, if you're good at reading like body visuals and visual cues from people, body language, you can add information because you can tell that that person is really paying attention and is really into what you're discussing. Also, avoid long lists, especially when the audience isn't listening to you. Nobody wants to have 10 bullet points on why it's put on a dog. If by bullet point 4 they're not getting the point, there's no point in going on 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be like, bam, there it is, bullet point 7, I need a dog, let's do it. So just remember, if the audience isn't listening, you're wasting their time and you're also wasting your time. Finally, tell the audience what to see. Just as I mentioned earlier, you want to guide them to what's important. When you do this, it's going to keep them interested and make sure that they're informed about what you're trying to talk about and that the information is current. Now I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Erin, and she's going to talk about designing the basic templates.
Thank you, Noe. So now that we've discussed the importance of titles and how to properly specify your point, I'm going to walk us through the basic steps of designing your visuals. First and foremost, you want to design a basic template. The easiest way to begin this step is by establishing a color scheme. Believe it or not, there's actually a lot that goes into selecting a color scheme, which is why we're going to cover this point on the next slide in more detail. It's also important to make wise typography decisions. Our book is a little bit sassy and mentions how there's 100+ fonts that PowerPoint offers, and it says we don't need to feel obligated to use them all. Now, I don't think anybody here is going to get font crazy and use a ton of fonts in their PowerPoint, but I thought it was worth mentioning since we all know how eccentric the marketing majors can be. I'm just kidding. In all seriousness, it is important to choose a legible font that's clear enough for even your audience in the back rows to see. Serif Times New Roman and Georgia create a classic font because of the little flourishes on each letter, whereas sans serif fonts like Calibri and Arial create a more modern look because they are sans serif or without flourishes. Serif fonts work better on printed paper than on projected screens, so it's probably smart to use sans serif fonts when giving a PowerPoint presentation. Regardless of the font you decide to use, try to limit yourself to 1 or 2 fonts so that you don't get carried away. Lastly, while designing a basic template, you should choose simple backgrounds and layouts. You have a ton of options when it comes to choosing PowerPoint or background in PowerPoint, but solid backgrounds are the safest choice. However, don't be afraid to incorporate a little bit color variation to kind of liven up your PowerPoint. But keep in mind how some colors affect the visibility of text. For example, if you have a white background, you should probably stay away from a pale yellow font color. So now, as promised, we're going to talk to you about the important factors you should keep in mind when establishing a color scheme. Your entire presentation is for your audience, so you should consider the fact that not all people interpret color the same way. For example, if you're at A&M giving a presentation, you probably don't want your color scheme to be burnt orange and white because of the rivalry with UT. You should also consider that 5 to 10% of the population see the colors red and green as gray because of color blindness. After you consider your audience, you can choose a background color for your slides. Dark colors like black, blue, and gray blend in with your screen and help the objects on your slides pop. Dark colors are also usually used in formal situations, which is important to keep in mind as we go on to get professional jobs. We want to warn against white backgrounds, though. Even though they tend to lighten up the room, they could also create an annoying glare. So if you're persistent and set on using a white background, we suggest going to the room you'll be presenting in beforehand and kind of sitting throughout the room to make sure your audience will be able to see the content rather than a glare. Lastly, make your titles visible and choose your text colors wisely. You need contrast between your text color and your background color so that your words will stand out. But you should try to limit your palette to 3 colors in addition to black, white, and gray, so that your slides still look professional and cohesive. Now, as far as actual diagrams and pictures go, you should think visually as you're putting a PowerPoint together. Make any diagrams you include match your message. For example, this diagram is called a chevron, and it should be used only when you're transitioning from one topic or item to another. So if you wanted to illustrate to your audience that you're moving from the opening of your presentation to the body, this would be perfect, but you wouldn't want to use a chevron if you were comparing and contrasting. Another factor to keep in mind is that photographs add interest. We've all heard the expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words, so make those 1,000 words count. Use images that capture the interest of your visual learners, back up your message, and bring some oomph to your presentation. You should also keep your slides super simple. People can't read and listen to different words simultaneously, so avoid putting long lists on your slides. As Noe mentioned earlier, when your audience is reading a list, they're not listening to you. And lastly, add visual flourish to your slides. You can do this by adding diagrams and images to your text, or you could even structure your text in a creative, fun way that flourishes your presentation. So instead of using this bulleted list like we have on the left, you can incorporate something like this on the right to kind of bring some livelihood to your presentation. So now that I've talked about designing a basic template and establishing a color scheme and giving you all examples of how to think visually, I'm going to pass it to Megan, who is going to talk about editing your efforts.
Editing is the last and, in my personal opinion, the most important step. What good is a perfect presentation or an A+ paper with stupid mistakes, basically, or misspelling a common word? Yes, I've done this. My first semester of college ever, I was in a hurry to print off a research paper, and it auto-corrected my last name to Newt. So that's pretty embarrassing. Nobody wants to go down that way. And don't rely on spell check, just like I'm sure we all, texting autocorrects, we've all probably sent a text message that didn't make sense just from not checking. Even as seniors, we've all wrote several papers, done several presentations, and you just don't want to mess it up and get point deductions from something so simple that could have been overlooked. Let's see. We also have a video to share that's pretty fun over what not to do for a PowerPoint presentation.
there's some things I hate about PowerPoint, and I figure it's kind of my duty to point them out. So here we go. Here's common PowerPoint mistakes. Number one, people tend to put every word they are going to say on their PowerPoint slides. Although this eliminates the need to memorize your talk, ultimately this makes your slides crowded, wordy, and boring. You will lose your audience's attention before you even reach the bottom of your first slide. Please don't do that anymore, please. Number two, most common, many people do not run spell check. Big mistake. Nothing makes you look stupider than spelling errors. If it's got a red line under it, recheck the spelling. And finally, I hate this. Avoid excessive bullet pointing, only bullet key points. Too many bullet points, and your key messages will not stand out. In fact, the term bullet point comes from people firing guns at annoying presenters.
So that's just that little clip. And then to summarize all of it, basically, even though we all kind of understand the basic concept of PowerPoint, we've done this a million times. We all know what to do, what not to do, but always just these points are helpful. Just start with your titles, be specific on your points, keep your template basic, just a simple design, think visually, include images, and always, always, always edit your efforts. Make sure that everything is error-free. And then we'll go with slides. Number one, when designing slides, you should start with your points. When your audience is reading a list, they are not. Number three, list 2 of the 3 points to keep in mind when designing a basic template. Number 4, how many color schemes should your